The atmosphere in Los Angeles had shifted in a way that no one at Forrester Creations could quite explain, as if an invisible storm cloud had rolled in and settled over every conversation, every glance, every heartbeat, and at the center of it all stood Taylor, strong, compassionate, and quietly burdened by a sense of impending doom she couldn't shake, even as she reassured those around her that everything would be fine, because that was who she had always been, the steady force, the healer, the one who believed that even the most broken souls could find redemption if given enough love and patience, and perhaps that was why she found herself drawn, time and time again, into Deacon's complicated orbit, despite the warnings, despite the risks, despite the shadows that seemed to follow him wherever he went, shadows that now felt darker than ever, closing in with a suffocating inevitability that no one could outrun, least of all Taylor, who had made the fateful decision to stand by him on a night that would change everything forever, a night that began with tension crackling in the air as old enemies resurfaced and long-buried grudges came violently to life, culminating in a confrontation so explosive, so terrifying, that even Deacon, no stranger to danger, found himself caught off guard, his life hanging by a thread as chaos erupted around him, and in that split second where fate demanded a choice, Taylor didn't hesitate, not even for a heartbeat, because saving someone else had always come more naturally to her than saving herself, and so she stepped forward, placing herself between Deacon and the deadly threat that loomed before them, her voice steady even as fear flickered in her eyes, her final words filled not with regret but with a fierce determination to protect the man she believed still had goodness left inside him. And then, in an instant that seemed to stretch into eternity, everything unraveled, a single, irreversible moment that would echo through the lives of everyone who knew them, as Taylor was struck down in an act of selfless bravery that no one saw coming, her body collapsing as the world around her dissolved into screams and disbelief, Deacon catching her just before she hit the ground, his hands trembling as he tried desperately to hold on to her, to keep her from slipping away, his voice breaking as he called her name over and over again, refusing to accept the reality unfolding before him, because this wasn't how it was supposed to. And not for her, not for someone who had given so much, who had fought so hard to bring light into the darkest corners of other people's lives, and yet there she was, fading fast, her strength leaving her with every passing second, her gaze locking onto Deacon's with a quiet intensity that spoke volumes without the need for words, as if she were trying to imprint something on his soul, something that would stay with him long after she was gone, and perhaps she knew in that moment that her sacrifice would be the catalyst for something greater, something that might finally force Deacon to confront the man he had become and the man he still had the chance to be. Because even as her life slipped through his fingers, Taylor's belief in redemption never wavered, not even at the very end, and when her eyes finally closed, the silence that followed was deafening, a void that seemed to swallow everything in its path, leaving behind only grief, shock, and an overwhelming sense of loss that rippled outward, touching everyone from Steffi and Thomas, who would soon be devastated by the news of their mother's tragic fate, to Ridge, whose complicated history with Taylor would be overshadowed by the realization that he had lost her forever, and even Brooke, who would find herself grappling with an unexpected wave of sorrow, because despite everything, Taylor had always been a constant presence, a reminder of what it meant to love deeply and forgive endlessly, and now that presence was gone, leaving behind a world that felt colder, harsher, and infinitely more fragile, while Deacon, the man she had died to save, would be left to carry the unbearable weight of her sacrifice, haunted by the knowledge that her final act had been one of love and courage directed toward him, a burden that would either break him completely or finally push him toward the redemption she had always believed he deserved, as whispers of what truly happened that night began to spread, sparking questions, suspicions, and a desperate search for justice that would only deepen the drama and intrigue surrounding her death, because nothing about this tragedy was simple, and the truth, as it slowly came to light, would reveal layers of betrayal, desperation, and hidden motives that no one had anticipated, ensuring that Taylor's story would not end with her death, but instead ignite a chain reaction of events that would reshape relationships, expose secrets, and force every character to confront their own choices in ways they never had before, as the memory of her bravery lingered like a guiding light in the darkness, a testament to the power of selflessness in a world so often defined by selfish desires. And even in death, Taylor would continue to influence the lives of those she left behind, her legacy woven into every decision, every conflict, and every moment of reflection that followed, proving that while her life may have ended in tragedy, the impact of her final act would resonate far beyond that single, heartbreaking night, leaving an indelible mark on the story that no one could ever erase. The days following Taylor's death were a blur of chaos and heartbreak as the news of her sacrifice spread like wildfire across Los Angeles. At Forrester Creations, the offices were steeped in an eerie silence, interrupted only by muffled sobs or the distant ringing of phones that no one had the energy to answer. Ridge sat at his desk, hands trembling, staring at a framed photograph of Taylor smiling, her warmth frozen in time, and for the first time in years, he questioned everything, the choices he had made, the relationships he had neglected, the moments he had taken for granted, all of it culminating in this unbearable loss. Steffi, barely holding herself together, had collapsed into Liam's arms, her grief raw and unfiltered, tears streaking down her face as she whispered her disbelief that her mother, the one who had been her anchor through so many storms, was gone, stolen away in the most heroic yet cruel twist of fate. Thomas paced back and forth, the weight of guilt pressing down on him, replaying every interaction with Taylor, every harsh word, every disagreement, wondering if somehow, some way, he could have prevented this, though deep down he knew it was impossible. Taylor's death had been an act of love, and nothing anyone could have done would have changed her choice to protect Deacon at the cost of her own life. Meanwhile, Deacon was inconsolable, a man haunted by the image of Taylor collapsing in his arms, her blood staining his hands as he desperately tried to hold on to her, to pull her back from the edge, to defy fate itself. But no matter how hard he fought, no miracle arrived. Nights became long and silent, broken only by the hollow sound of his own heartbeat and the echoes of her final words, forever etched into his memory. He wandered the halls of their shared past, memories of laughter, of tender moments, of whispered promises, now bitter reminders of what he had lost. Each glance at her empty seat, each room she had once filled with life, pressed on him like a physical weight, and the guilt of surviving while she did not was unbearable. The one person he had been desperate to save had perished because of him, and Deacon's grief became a storm unto itself, drowning every rational thought, every sense of hope. For the extended Forrester and Spencer families, the ramifications were immediate and far-reaching. Brooke struggled to offer support to Ridge, Steffi, and Thomas, though her own sorrow for Taylor, the friend, the coworker, the complicated yet loyal woman she had known for decades, was profound. She watched helplessly as Deacon's anguish intensified, the man she had once loved now a broken figure wandering through the remnants of a life they all thought could be controlled. Even Katie and Thorne were drawn into the vortex of tragedy, attending funerals, consoling grieving children, and facing the unbearable truth that Taylor's absence would change everything, leaving a void that no one could fill. The legal aftermath began to unfold as authorities arrived to investigate the events that led to Taylor's death. Questions swirled. Could anyone be held accountable for the attack that had threatened Deacon? Were there people who had allowed such danger to escalate unchecked? And at the center of it all, Taylor's heroism was both celebrated and mourned, a paradox that left everyone grappling with pride and guilt simultaneously. The media sensationalized her death, labeling it the ultimate sacrifice and the tragic hero of Los Angeles, while friends and family contended with the intimate, painful reality that Taylor was gone forever and nothing could bring her back. Deacon, unable to endure the constant reminders of her absence, retreated from the world for a time. The mansion that had once been filled with laughter and love became a sanctuary of sorrow, the walls echoing with memories of Taylor's gentle voice and unwavering support. He poured himself into remembering every detail of her, the way she smiled when he told a bad joke, how she always seemed to know when to offer comfort without words, the softness of her hand in his, and the courage she displayed in the most harrowing of moments. Her death, though tragic, became a moral compass for him, forcing him to reflect on his own actions, to confront his mistakes, and to reconsider what kind of man he truly wanted to be in the shadow of her ultimate sacrifice. Even beyond the walls of Forrester Creations, Taylor's influence persisted. Friends, co-workers, and even rivals were forced to confront their own choices, their own moral failings, and their own hearts in the wake of her absence. The city of Los Angeles seemed to mourn her, as if the air itself carried the weight of loss, the sense that a light had been extinguished far too soon. And though the pain was raw, Taylor's legacy, the courage, the love, the unselfish devotion to others, began to inspire those left behind, reminding them of the power of empathy, the importance of sacrifice, and the lasting impact one person can have on so many lives. In the quiet moments, as nights stretched long and memories lingered, Deacon, Steffi, Ridge, Thomas, Brooke, and the others began to find small ways to honor Taylor. Stories were told, laughter was recalled, tears were shed, and gradually, they began to weave her memory into the fabric of their lives. Though the tragedy would never leave them completely, her bravery served as a beacon, a reminder that love and courage could transcend even death. Taylor's story, though ending in heartbreak, continued to shape the lives of those she had touched, ensuring that while she was gone, she would never truly be forgotten. And in that way, Taylor's ultimate sacrifice became both the final act of a life devoted to others and the beginning of a lasting legacy that would forever alter the course of everyone's journey at Forrester Creations and beyond. The funeral was set on a crisp, gray morning, with a chill in the air that seemed to mirror the icy emptiness left behind by Taylor's absence. Flowers of white and pale pink lined the chapel, their delicate fragrance attempting, in vain, to mask the suffocating weight of grief. Friends and family gathered, each carrying their own pain, each struggling with the realization that the woman who had been the glue in so many fractured relationships, the mediator, the healer, the steadfast presence in a chaotic world, was gone forever. Ridge, usually so composed even in crises, stood at the podium, his hands trembling as he tried to organize his thoughts, trying to speak words that could honor her, yet every sentence fell short, eclipsed by the enormity of the loss. "Taylor," he began, voice breaking, "you were more than a wife, a mother, a friend. You were the heart of all of us. And now the world feels colder, because you're gone." His words hung in the air, swallowed by silence, as Steffi clutched Liam's arm, trying to ground herself while her own tears threatened to consume her. Thomas, usually so self-assured, seemed almost hollow, pacing at the back of the chapel, whispering apologies into the air, as though Taylor could somehow hear him, forgive him, reassure him, even from beyond the grave. Deacon, meanwhile, could barely bear to be present. Every glance, every whisper, every quiet moment seemed to pierce his heart. He remembered the last moments they had shared, the fear, the determination, the bravery that had defined her final act, and the pain of surviving while she did not was unbearable. The memory of her collapsing into his arms haunted him, replaying relentlessly in his mind, her life leaving his hands like water slipping through fingers he could never grasp again. His grief manifested as silence. He spoke little, moved little, but the sorrow radiating from him was palpable to anyone who dared look. As the days passed, the shock began to evolve into a complex web of anger, guilt, and unresolved emotions. Ridge found himself clashing with Brooke over decisions about the family, his own sorrow amplifying each disagreement. Brooke, in her grief, sought comfort in controlling aspects of the household, trying to preserve what Taylor had protected so effortlessly, while Ridge's rage and heartbreak often overrode reason, leading to tense confrontations that left the entire family on edge. Steffi, meanwhile, struggled with guilt. She had argued with her mother the night before the tragic events, words exchanged in youthful frustration now echoing cruelly in her mind. She began to withdraw, retreating to her room at the mansion for hours, replaying scenes in her mind and imagining what-ifs that would haunt her for years. Thomas, whose complicated relationship with Taylor had always been fraught with tension and longing, found himself consumed by conflicting emotions. There was sorrow, yes, but also regret for words left unsaid, moments of tenderness never fully realized, and the harsh reality that Taylor's death had left him without the chance for reconciliation he had always secretly desired. In quiet moments, he would sit in her old office, lingering over photographs, journals, and mementos, his fingers brushing over items she had touched, as if trying to feel her presence, to draw from her courage, even as the emptiness grew more suffocating with every passing hour. At Forrester Creations, the workplace atmosphere mirrored the heaviness of the family's personal grief. Employees whispered in corners, offering condolences, sharing memories of Taylor, but no one could mask the sense of loss that permeated the hallways. Every decision now seemed colored by her absence, the absence of her keen mind, her empathetic guidance, her steady hand in moments of corporate turbulence. Meetings were tense, strategy discussions were subdued, and a general sense of uncertainty settled over the company, as though Taylor's death had removed the invisible stabilizing force that had once guided everyone through the storm. Deacon, unable to function normally, began spending long hours alone, wandering the mansion, replaying the fatal night over and over in his mind. He would sit in the room where Taylor had been struck, staring at the walls, imagining her voice, her smile, her final courageous act. Friends tried to reach him, tried to pull him back into the living world, but he remained haunted, disconnected, trapped in a private torment. Nights were the hardest. Sleep came fitfully, interrupted by nightmares of losing her, of failing to protect her despite her ultimate sacrifice. It was during these long nights that he realized something fundamental, that Taylor had left behind not just memories, but a standard, a moral compass, a reminder of the courage, love, and selflessness he had failed to embody consistently. As the weeks turned into months, the family slowly began to navigate a new reality, one that was irrevocably changed by Taylor's death. Deacon, fueled by grief and a desperate need to honor her memory, began to take steps toward redemption, helping others, repairing fractured relationships, and confronting the darker aspects of his past that Taylor had always silently forgiven him for. Steffi, with Liam's support, started to channel her sorrow into meaningful work, dedicating herself to causes Taylor had championed and slowly finding purpose in keeping her mother's legacy alive. Ridge, though still grieving, began to use his grief as a catalyst for reflection, attempting to mend relationships strained over decades, striving to embody some of the compassion Taylor had so effortlessly embodied. And yet, the shadow of that fateful night never fully lifted. Every birthday, every holiday, every family gathering was a reminder of the absence that could never be replaced. Deacon, Ridge, Steffi, Thomas, Brooke, they all carried Taylor with them, in their hearts, in their decisions, and in the silent moments when grief became too heavy to bear alone. Her sacrifice had saved a life, yes, but it had also left a wound, a scar, that would define them forever. It was a tragic paradox. Taylor's courage ensured Deacon's survival but simultaneously plunged everyone she loved into a profound and unrelenting sorrow. Despite the heartbreak, there was a quiet power in her absence. Her legacy became a guidepost for the living, a reminder of the extraordinary strength it took to love unconditionally, to put another's life above one's own, and to act with moral clarity even when the stakes were unimaginably high. Those left behind slowly began to realize that Taylor's story was more than tragedy. It was a blueprint for bravery, an enduring testament to selflessness, and a call to rise above personal flaws, fears, and regrets. And so,